Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles, where today, Fuzzy Lollipop, good name, is going to be playing a Tier 8 standard battle here on the Two Brothers map, in the Tier 8 tech tree Swedish destroyer, the Erland. This is, once again, a bit of a good news, bad news situation. The good news is that there is no radar on the enemy team. The enemy team have 4 cruisers, none of them have radar. The bad news for the enemy team is that of the 4 cruisers on Fuzzy Lollipop's team, one of them does have radar. The Azure Lane Montpellier, which is basically a premium version of the Cleveland. The bad news is that there is a carrier in play, one on each team, and while the carrier is only tier 6, and the Erland does have pretty good AA, backed up by the defensive fire consumable, he's still not going to want to get spotted by that carrier. Not least of which because having pretty good AA and the defensive fire consumable is no guarantee of protection from being struck by an enemy carrier. It's the spotting that he really needs to be careful about, because he does not have a smoke screen, and the Erland has the lowest hit point pool of any of the tier 7 destroyers. This is mitigated somewhat by the fact that he does have a heal. But he's going to have to be real careful if he's even going to consider using the guns on this thing. And the guns on this thing aren't bad. It does only have 2 turrets, but each gun is capable of spitting out 24 shots per minute, so it has good DPM. But the guns have kind of short range. So if you're going to be using the guns on this thing, that does mean that you're going to have to get a lot closer than is comfortable to your targets. And of course, most of the time, the second you start firing, you get spotted, unless you've been able to make creative use of concealment. And you don't have a smoke screen to hide in. And with a top speed of 35 knots, in the Tier 8 destroyer with the lowest hit point pool, for a lot longer than you're likely to be happy with. So that leaves the torpedoes. And the torpedoes are a bit of a mixed bag. There are 2 different sets of torpedoes that you can equip on this ship. The M1943s, which is what Fuzzy Lollipop has, and the M1943 Mod 1s. Both have a range of 12 kilometers, which is fine. Both have a speed of 76 knots, which is very good. The differences between them are in the length of time that it takes to reload the 2 triple torpedo launchers and the amount of damage that the individual torpedoes do. And neither of these sets of torpedoes do huge amounts of damage, with the Mod 1s doing just over 10,000, which is still pretty bad. But the ones that Fuzzy Lollipop have only do around 7,500, which is absolutely terrible. But they do come with a faster reload, 59 seconds, as opposed to the 70-second reload on the Mod 1s. The other downside to the torpedoes is that the ship is only equipped with 2 triple launchers, which means it can only put 6 torpedoes over the side at once. And, well, if each torpedo is only doing 7,500 damage, you do the math. That means the most that you can possibly expect to achieve, even if all 6 torpedoes hit the target, is 45,000 damage. And that might seem like a lot, but first all 6 torpedoes have to hit the target. They also have to hit the target somewhere where it's not already damage saturated, and then you have to deduct the target's torpedo damage resistance. So you're not going to be doing any drive-by sinkings of full health battleships in this thing. It just does not have the torpedo firepower. Meanwhile, first blood has gone to the enemy team, with the enemy Tier 8 destroyer, the Orkan, sinking the friendly Tier 6 destroyer, the Icarus, and Fuzzy Lollipop's been spotted. Like it or not, he is now in a gunfight. Now this isn't terrible news, because he does have the DPM to take this guy. It's just a question of how much damage he's going to suffer doing it. Fortunately, the Gaede has made a couple of critical errors. First, he's managed to engage Fuzzy Lollipop in a position where basically nobody else on his team can offer any kind of fire support. Secondly, he's pinned up against the island there with nowhere to run to. Thirdly, and most critically, he's getting into a torpedo fight with a gunboat. The lengthy delay in his returning fire there was him getting the torpedoes off. And Fuzzy Lollipop was able to just narrowly avoid all of them, which means that this is a foregone conclusion. He's got this kill. The Gaede also wasn't running the last stand skill, so Lollipop's first salvo that took his engine out basically sealed his fate. he might have been able to get away with that, although it's doubtful, if he had smoke ready to go in order to hide in. But he actually came out of his smoke screen in order to get into a torpedo fight with a gunboat, so yeah. Also, I don't know if you noticed it there in chat. You'll see it again the next time the chat window activates when somebody says something, but the Gaede just called Fuzzy Lollipop a cheat. There it is. I'm not sure why. I guess it's always easy just to accuse the person who killed you of being a cheater and a hacker rather than admitting that you actually got outplayed. There's a certain school of thought that argues that being accused of cheating by somebody who you just comprehensively outplayed is the single biggest compliment they can pay you. And yeah, there's probably some truth to that. Fuzzy Lollipop didn't get away scot-free, of course, although realistically, 'twas but a scratch. I mean, he lost some health and was forced to expend one charge of his repair party. Slightly more concerning are two things. One, the enemy team are ahead and have a 100-point advantage and a 1-kill advantage. Technically, I suppose that's three things. But even more worrisome, at least for Fuzzy Lollipop, is he is the only ship left on this side of the map. Even though he didn't have that many teammates over here to begin with. And he definitely doesn't want to be getting into any gunfights with heavy cruisers like the Hipper, or battleships with secondary armaments like the Atlantico. And torpedoing these guys is going to be difficult because that's a Hipper and it has great hydro. There was also a Helena over on this flank, but he's further up to the north after sustaining some fairly heavy damage. He's pulled back, but that's still, well, not the two kind of opponents you want to be facing in this kind of destroyer. Personally, I would have tried to torpedo the Atlantico there rather than going for torpedoes on the Hipper. I mean, I can see why he went for the Hipper. The Hipper's given a much bigger target to shoot at, and has less torpedo damage resistance. The Atlantico's largely nose in, but the Atlantico is far enough away from the Hipper that it won't be able to receive any benefit from the Hipper's hydro, assuming the Hipper is running the hydro. Either way, he's gone for the Hipper, and honestly, it's completely academic because all 6 of the torpedoes have missed the Hipper anyway. Meanwhile, over in the middle of the map, because this is Two Brothers, an enemy Scharnhorst is sailing down the middle. And that's going to be real bad news for Fuzzy Lollipop, as the Helena also makes a reappearance, because that Scharnhorst is distracting any of Fuzzy Lollipop's teammates who are in a position to help him out with the Hipper and the Atlantico. That Scharnhorst has popped up at a very bad time, because anybody who turns to deal with the Scharnhorst is going to be giving broadsides to the Hipper and the Atlantico, and anybody who turns to angle against the Hipper and Atlantico is going to be given a broadside to the Scharnhorst. And he's been spotted, because he forgot to turn his anti-aircraft guns off, and the Hipper, proving that he's at least capable of thinking and breathing at the same time, has put his catapult fighters up. And shooting at those has gotten Fuzzy Lollipop spotted, and he's dithering between trying to shoot the fighters down and stay undetected, and that's given the Hipper an opportunity to unload a bunch of 8-inch high explosive into him, and the Atlantico's secondaries to follow it up with some extremely unwelcome damage, but he's managed to put enough space between himself and the spotting aircraft now that he's once again managed to go undetected. The Hipper, in reaction to Fuzzy Lollipop being spotted, is now changing course and providing a beautiful opportunity target for the Bismarck over there in the cap circle to shoot at, and the Bismarck is not wasting that opportunity. Unfortunately, he's in a Bismarck, and he doesn't have the most accurate 15-inch guns in the world, so the Hipper gets away with it. Fuzzy Lollipop continues his fighting withdrawal, just trying to slow these guys down and give his team time to get their shit together. But it's only really the Bismarck who's in a position to help him. There's a New Orleans and a Sinop over there, but they appear to be more interested in the enemy team coming around from the northeastern end of the map. The Bismarck is turning, presumably to get all of his guns to bear on the Hipper and help Fuzzy Lollipop out. Unfortunately for the Bismarck, that is exactly what the Atlantico was waiting for, and he bitch slaps the Bismarck's broadside and sends him to the bottom. Fortunately for Fuzzy Lollipop, the enemy carrier is doing absolutely nothing to help the Hipper and the Atlantico out, which means he doesn't have to risk being spotted, because that would be fatal, and is able to continue harassing the Hipper and the Atlantico with his torpedoes. And while the Hipper does have very good hydro, it can't have it running all of the time. His torpedo cooldown is way shorter than the Hipper's hydro cooldown, which doesn't mean that he only has to get lucky once, because these torpedoes only do 7,500 damage. Even though that one actually seemed to do more. But he's going to have to do a lot more than that. He's going to have to get lucky many, many times in order to stop these guys from closing in and catching the rest of his team in the vice of this crossfire. And it's only his being here that has stopped these guys from advancing further forward up to those islands and doing exactly that, because the enemy team have now extended their lead even further and have now cleared out everybody except Fuzzy Lollipop, who's in a position to defend the cap. And that probably means the Scharnhorst in the middle, yep, there he is, has picked this moment to strike. And if that Scharnhorst is capable of thinking and breathing at the same time, that is all kinds of bad news for Fuzzy Lollipop's team, because he can just sit there in the mouth of the Sound between the two islands, with the island on the right there shielding him from the overwhelming majority of the rest of Fuzzy Lollipop's team. And he can do that while in the border of the cap circle. And that's exactly what he's done. So now Fuzzy Lollipop has to not only stay out of detection range of the Hipper and the Atlantico and the Helena, who's also just shown up, while continuing to try to slow them down with his torpedoes to buy the rest of his team some time, and it looks like he is probably going to get 1, maybe 2 hits on the Atlantico. But still, not a huge amount of damage. And he also has to stay out of detection range of the Scharnhorst, because if any of them spot him, he's basically dead meat. And with the Scharnhorst there, as well as those 3, although at the moment we can only see 2 of them, nobody else on his team is going to be rushing over here anytime fast. There is one bit of good news, however. It turns out the Scharnhorst was not capable of thinking and breathing at the same time, because instead of sitting in the mouth of the Sound there between the two islands and flipping the cap, he is instead coming out to the one spot where he could get shot at by more than one member of Fuzzy Lollipop's team. The Scharnhorst is, of course, trying to win harder. He was in a position where the only members of Fuzzy Lollipop's team who could attack him were Fuzzy Lollipop himself, and Fuzzy Lollipop ain't shooting at him and getting spotted, and the friendly carrier. And he's now come out from behind the cover of the island, is getting shot at by everybody, and has basically just lost all of his health. And I think he's going to get finished off by the friendly Sherborg. Yeah. So that was nice. Completely unnecessary. But never interrupt the enemy when they're making a mistake. They're still behind on points, of course, as well as kills, because the team just lost their Sinop as well to some long-range fire from the enemy Attico. And now the Atlantico is inside the cap circle and flipping it. Gee, if only the Scharnhorst had stayed where he was. Fuzzy Lollipop's team would probably already have lost. More torpedoes out against the Atlantico. He's about a third of the way through to finish capping. But, well, Fuzzy Lollipop isn't just harassing and slowing them down with his torpedoes, he's keeping them spotted. His fight and withdrawal has basically kept pretty much all 3 of these guys spotted since the start of the game. So, resetting the Atlantico should not be a problem. What is going to be a problem is resetting all 3 of the enemy ships, because all 3 of them are now inside the cap circle. The Atlantico, the Hipper, and the Helena over there. And the Helena is hidden between 2 islands, with Fuzzy Lollipop the only person who can do anything about him. And the rest of his team are all clustered together and still going down one by one, only seem to be shooting at the Atlantico and not the Hipper. And while Fuzzy Lollipop does not want to get into a gunfight if he can possibly avoid it, he can no longer avoid it. He's managed to get a torpedo hit, but it's the guns on the Helena that are important now. He's got the kill. He takes some hits from the Atlantico's secondaries. That's a lot of hits from the Atlantico's secondaries. He gets the torpedoes away, the engine boost is running, he's now motoring full speed to get into the cover of that island, while simultaneously resetting the Hipper. His engine has been knocked out, but with the engine boost and the last stand skill, he's able to keep going at a reasonable speed. I'm sure he'd prefer to be going a lot faster though, because he is still exposed to the secondaries of the Atlantico, although he has now managed to go undetected, and is able to keep shooting at the Hippo without being spotted. Those torpedoes are looking like they might be bad news for the Atlantico. But here's the thing. I mean, clearly he wants to continue doing damage while he still can without putting himself at undue risk, but he doesn't need to hit these guys anymore in order to save the cap. And the Sherborg's managed to get a kill. He just needs to get into the cap circle, because your base cannot be capped if there's a friendly ship in there. That's the good news. Here's the bad news. Take a look at the minimap. And we're not looking at the fact that his entire team have all been herded into one corner of the map here. I mean, that's bad, but it's not the funny thing. The funny thing is the position of the friendly carrier. Look at the Serov. Look at the Atago on his ass. Feel free to scroll back in the video if you like and look at exactly what that Serov did to end up in that position. Because as the rest of the team were all falling back to defend the cap against the Hipper and the Atlantico, the Serov was sailing north. Because, I don't know, forgot he was in an aircraft carrier, maybe thought he was in a destroyer, and now he's turned around with an Atago on his arse. That's not entirely bad news though, for reasons that I'll go into in a moment, but for now, Fuzzy Lollipop is about to claim his third kill. And he finally puts the Atlantico down and secures the cap. The reason why having an Atago on the arse of your carrier is not entirely bad news is because, well, the Atago was doing what most people do when they suddenly find themselves within 2 kilometers of a carrier and they have torpedoes, trying to torpedo the carrier rather than shooting at him. And that left him a sitting duck for the rest of Fuzzy Lollipop's team. And now, for the first time in this entire battle, they're actually ahead. But of course, the second I open my big fat mouth, they lose the Montpellier and the enemy team go ahead on points once again. Although it's a very, very narrow points lead, and Fuzzy Lollipop's team do have the kill advantage. I think, however, most people would probably agree if I was to... Ooh, wow, yeah, the carrier is probably going to die very, very soon, which means the enemy team are going to equalise the kills and go even further ahead on points. But I think I can fairly confidently state, without too much fear of contradiction, that the only reason that Fuzzy Lollipop's team are still in this fight is because of the enemy carrier. I mean, yeah, it's absolutely 100% true that Fuzzy Lollipop deserves to be praised for his calm, methodical, and precise defence of that flank, keeping the Atlantico, the Hipper, and the Helena spotted. Watching the Scharnhorst make a complete and utter tit out of himself. Keeping those guys spotted so that the cap could be defended, as well as sinking 2 of them himself. But the biggest reason that Fuzzy Lollipop was able to do that wasn't just because of the way he played, but it was also because the enemy carrier let him do it. Remember, he's in a destroyer with a very, very low health pool. No smoke screen. His single biggest hazard was getting spotted. Look at all the damage that he took when he did get spotted. And remember, he only got spotted 3 times. And with the exception of when he got bounced by the Ernst Gaede at the beginning of the battle, and when he accidentally shot at the Hipper's catapult fighters, every other time that he did get spotted and subjected to enemy fire were on his terms, when he was ready for it. And despite that, he's still burnt through all 4 of his heals, and he only has 8,000 health left. Now imagine if that carrier over there had sent aircraft to scout him even just once, with a Helena, an Atlantico secondaries, and a Hipper waiting to shoot at him. I'm not saying the Serov was single-handedly responsible for his team's defeat. Obviously this is a team game and all kinds of people have to make all kinds of bad decisions in order for that to be true. But I am saying that if he'd stopped farming damage on battleships and cruisers for as little as 1 minute, there's no way that Fuzzy Lollipop would have been able to pull off what he just pulled off. And this match would probably already be over. Of course, it's not over yet. Whoa, that was close. And Fuzzy Lollipop's team are still losing. They do still need to get a kill in the next minute and a half in order to flip the scores. Or actually, no they don't. They just need to all stay alive and chase the carrier out of the cap circle, because there's only 7 points in it, and 1 minute and 20 seconds to go. There's only 5 points in it. The Serov needs to stay inside the cap circle. But he obviously doesn't want to do that, because if he does, he's going to die, and his team will lose. But if he doesn't defend the cap, his team are going to lose. There's only 1 point in it. Defensive fire is up. Fuzzy Lollipop's team are now 1 point ahead. Now the Serov needs to die, because with that guy still alive, and he's not because the Cherbourg finished him off, thanks to Fuzzy Lollipop's spotting, he can still finish him though. Even with defensive fire up, it's next to impossible to stop a carrier from getting a successful strike off. But he's done it. And of course it's a Russian carrier, so it only gets the one attack per strike. And so Fuzzy Lollipop's team are now, once again, ahead on points. And they're going to stay ahead on points as long as Fuzzy Lollipop remains inside this cap circle, which means the enemy Orkan is no longer in the position where he can just run, hide, run down the timer, and take the points victory. He must get at least one kill. Which means the Cherbourg over there doesn't need to chase after him anymore. Although, to be completely fair to the Cherbourg, the Orkan had his chance with his torpedoes. They all just missed. The match is now over, and Fuzzy Lollipop's team have done it. So, congratulations to Fuzzy Lollipop, a very precise, methodical defense of the cap there, and I'm sure he'd like to extend his thanks to his friends, his family, his agent, his agent's dog, his agent's dog's tennis partner, and last but by no means least, the enemy aircraft carrier, without whom that would almost certainly not have been possible. Hope you enjoyed today's video, and as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.